Good morning, uh, Advocate Mustafa Saab. So,
Assalamu alaikum.
I
Good
just
morning, Jinab.
Assalamu alaikum. So, at the outset, I just want to clear it out. He is Mr. Advocate Mustafa Saab, and I am Mutasif. In my last video, a lot of people had commented Mustafa Saab, Mustafa Saab. So, I just want to make it clear that he is Mustafa and I am Mutasif. And Mustafa Saab is a very renowned legal expert in Ladakh. He has basically come in limelight in the recent days as a constitutional expert, as a legal advisor, and he's basically a student of law, right? And both of us belong to Ladakh from different districts, of course, right? So, Mustafa Saab, we have this. This is just the initial part, conceptualization of a program called Bridging Voices, right? So, somewhere we believe that there is a gap between the younger generation and the older generation, right? And
Mhm.
also there are so many gaps, spaces, when it comes to information, right? And in the existing current scenario, when we look at the tribes that are existing across the Himalayan region, uh, we have somewhere, like, we realize, the intelligentsia realizes that we have been the biggest losers in this debate that has emerged since the formation of India as a nation state, because we do not have that much of population, and two, or b, our representation in the parliament or in policy making is almost negligible, right? So all of this has resulted because of a gap in information. Now, Mustafa Saab, you have been very active. You've been legally involved when it comes to Ladakh and whatever is politically happening in Ladakh, right? So, as a result, you have been talking around, or you've been involved around understandings of different, aspects of the constitution, and when it especially comes to the aspect of tribes. So, इसमें मैं आपसे सिर्फ ये पहले to start off the discussion, I just want to understand, uh, what does Schedule 6 or Article 371, or you can say, when the tribals of Himalayan states seek for protection, right? What does it mean in the constitution? Yeah, is there any scope for that? Or just demanding protection, does it mean that the Himalayan states become anti-national, right? Or, as you must have read, in the discussions of the Constitutional Assembly, again, we find terms like tribalistan emerging, right? So, does it mean that, by demanding a certain autonomy, by demanding certain protection, we are being a threat to the nation state? Ji, Mustafa.
Uh, मुतासिब ले आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. I hope my voice is audible enough.
Yes.
And पहले तो let me clarify that I'm not an expert, nor have I come into highlight. And
Right.
I believe that I'm only a student of law, as you correctly pointed out.
Mm.
But at the same time, I believe that I have been fortunate enough that I've been given the opportunity by Apex, especially, to work with them on the legal issues. तो मैं समझता हूँ कि इसकी वजह से मुझे मौका मिला उनके साथ काम करने का, तो I could be associated with them. तो आपका बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया फॉर कॉलिंग मी ऑन योर दिस शो. एंड आई थिंक मतलब मेरा भी ये मानना है कि हम जितना ज़्यादा एक दूसरे से बात करेंगे, स्पेशली
Right.
जो हमारे यंगर लॉट है, उससे
Mm.
हमारी जो डिमेंशन है, आइडिया का जो डायमेंशन है, और बढ़ेगा, और भी हमें चीज़ें आएंगी. तो मैंने बार बार बोला है, एज ए लॉयर ओनली, whenever I've gotten the opportunity, I've told people, especially the youth and the जो हमारे intellectuals हैं, जो हमारे students हैं, that everybody in this journey has a role to play, and that role is to contribute towards this cause, whether it is in terms of academia, whether it is in terms of research, or otherwise. Also, you need your solidarities, because as we speak, Kasuna Manchuk is on fast right now, and I feel that we all should come in solidarity and should support him. And there are other हमारे जो leaders हैं, what I've realized is that it feels like a very thankless job, for them sometimes. I have seen that people, left, right, and center criticize them in comments and say all sorts of things, but when it comes to supporting them, there is very less
Mm.
support to them. तो वो मुझे लगता है कि उस पे भी हमें सोचने की जरूरत है, instead of, because this is a journey which we all should own up, and this is a journey which belongs to all of us, So my at the beginning, at the outset, I want to make it clear that everybody anyone who's listening to this, my appeal is that you should contribute. जैसे हम दोनों contribute करेंगे. When we talk, when we discuss, we take something out of this conversation and take something back. And also at the same time, we give something to the society through these conversations. तो इसलिए मेरा ये मानना है बहुत शुरू से ही कि ये conversations बहुत important होती है. ये बात करना to address issues. तो मुझे उम्मीद है कि आज का ये जो टॉक रहेगा वो भी ऐसे ही रहेगा. Now coming to the question that you asked, that in the beginning जो इस तरह से आपने कहा कि nation state has seen us very, we have had a very aloof uh,
Mhm.
position in the society, in the country. That is true, and because of which you said we could not participate enough in the lawmaking, or for example in the polity and the policy of India, है ना? We couldn't
Mhm.
participate in that because our position was such that we did not have any representation whatsoever. But at the same time, that makes my point, which I believe, which I always endorse, which is that the people decentralization should always take place, and people on the ground should be given the powers to make laws, and that is what India is all about. So in a case where we do not have representation at the center, it is important that you empower people on the ground, and that is why you have the Autonomous Hill Development Council. That is why you had something called Article 370 and special status of Jammu and Kashmir. Because right now, at this moment, when you talk about these things, they seem very strange. But these were arrangements that were a part of the Constitution of India. It was a journey of the Constitution of India also, and it was
Mhm.
not a separate entity altogether, the state of Jammu and Kashmir. तो ऐसे में मैं समझता हूँ कि जो हमारी जिस तरह से हम one way of looking at it is that from the point of the center, that we are far away from the center, and one perception is that we are far away, and that is why we do not participate. But the other point of view, which I strongly believe in, is that because we are far away, we should be given those powers to deal with Ladakh in our own ways,
Mhm.
because क्योंकि हम we are the best placed people who know how to deal with Ladakh, whether it is strategically to help the army, or it is internally within Ladakh, as to say the environment or the tribal identities and the tribal interests of the people of Ladakh. These are all areas जिसमें हमें ज़्यादा expertise है locals को, and this is how the polity of India, decentralization का जो concept है पूरे India में, it is all about that only, कि आप किस तरह से ग्राउंड पे लोगों को अपने हिसाब से चलाने के लिए देंगे. तो मेरा ये मानना है कि जब हम लद्दाख के लोग इस तरह से हमें देखने की जरूरत है कि हमें ही ये इख्तियार देना चाहिए कि हम किस तरह से लद्दाख को चलाएं, बिकॉज लद्दाख इज इन माय बिलीफ that if you look at the history of the hill councils right from 1997, and if you look at the political history भी हमारा देखो तो हमारा more or less बाकी in relation to other states and other union territories, we have had a very successful history, political history, in the sense
Mhm.
that our autonomous development councils have been far more better than the rest of the councils, even in the six scheduled areas, which is uh, which is a big deal, I believe, which is a big achievement in itself. Because
Mhm.
assuming क्या होता है, assumption usually क्या होता है कि जो सिक्स शेड्यूल एरियाज हैं वहाँ के autonomous hill development councils बहुत ज्यादा strong है, तो उनका कोई ज्यादा रोल होगा. But I have read and we have seen that in most of the hill councils there's a lot of corruption. In the northeast, one of the biggest challenges has been that there is a lot of corruption, whereas in the case of Ladakh that has not been the case, and people have been honest more or less, and that is the inspiration I get from my leaders also, जो भी leaders इस वक्त जुड़े हैं in our movement. The strongest point about all of them is that they are honest leaders, and that is what inspires you. मतलब personally मैं अगर बोलूं, it may
Mhm.
sound like a personal story, but what strikes me, is that all of them have been they have had a very long political career, all of them individually, but at the same time, they have been quite honest and quite successful in their areas, and that is where the legitimacy comes from. तो इस तरह से हमारे हिल काउंसिल्स की भी अच्छी तारीख रहेगी. तो मेरा ये मानना है, my suggestion, if I were to make a suggestion to the government of India, would be that you should take advice from Ladakhis and decide, and let us decide what is good and what is bad for Ladakh, instead of you telling us what is good for us, what is bad for us. And that is the reason why we have been very adamant in our demands कि लद्दाख
Mhm.
को लद्दाखी ही बता सकते हैं, and that is unfortunately not the case anymore.
Mhm.
इंडिया की ये रहा कि it has always been, whether it is central BJP or the Congress or Janata Party, irrespective of which party is in power, it has always
Mhm.
been a from down to bottom approach. इसको
Right.
बॉटम अप अप्रोच होने की जरूरत है, जो इंडिया की पूरी कहानी है, एंड स्पेशली इन द केस ऑफ लद्दाख उसको वैसा अप्रोच होने की जरूरत है. तो एंड कमिंग टू द क्वेश्चन अबाउट एंटी नेशनल, वो हमें देखते हैं ट्राइबलाइजेशन होता है, वो
Mhm.
उस आई थिंक इट इज ए
Tribalistan.
वेरी ट्राइबलिस्तान होता है, जो ट्राइबलाइजेशन होता है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल
Right.
स्ट्रेट जैकेट में रख के उसको एक अपनी आइडेंटिटी से सोचना, दैट इंडिया में एंटी नेशनल तो खैर अलग ही एक आर्गुमेंट हो गया, बिकॉज लद्दाख की इफ यू लुक एट हिस्ट्री, दैट इज
true.
एन आर्गुमेंट आई डू नॉट वांट टू गो इन द फर्स्ट प्लेस, बिकॉज मुझे
Mm,
ऐसा लगता है कि उस पर अलग ही हमें डिबेट कर सकते हैं कि क्या एंटी नेशनल है क्या नहीं है, बिकॉज
uh,
इन इंडिया एक हमेशा एक वो भी रहा कि एक बाइनरी क्रिएट किया हमेशा, लेफ्ट के बीच में, फिर अल्ट्रा लेफ्ट क्या है, लेफ्ट क्या है, फिर कभी कम्युनिस्ट को करके, फिर कभी कश्मीरी मुस्लिम्स को करके। I've always
mm,
seen people say that you are good Muslims because you're a Ladakhi Muslim, whereas Kashmiriयों की तरह मत बनो. These are very strong boundaries, and this is very problematic. We can keep this for another day, for another debate. But coming to the point, my point is that कि हमें लद्दाख की को, हमारी तारीख को देखकर, हमारे लोगों की जो कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस को देखकर हमें इनको सुनना चाहिए, जो सुन नहीं रहे तो वो आई बिलीव इज वेरी स्ट्रेंज।
true. इसमें मतलब basic, I think, I mean, one thing we need to understand that we are functioning in a country or a state like India, right? In wherein population has become a major issue, right? And democracy has often been conflated today with majoritarianism in that sense, right? Yeah, of 100 people, अगर 70 ने किसी चीज को वोट दे दिया तो that will decide for the 30% as well. Whereas in India, we believe in something called constitutionalism. Even the opinion of those 30 people should matter, right? Now, we'll go on to that, but for now, it is unfortunate. But I think even locally in Ladakh, there is a debate that is emerging, right? I saw a sorry, article, if I can call it that, recently, wherein, there was a caption wherein it read that if Ladakh goes for statehood, then it leads to the slavery of Buddhists in
The
Ladakh.
Buddhist.
Right now, now as somebody, as a student of law, I just want to ask you, like for this, at least you can tell them what the Indian federal structure looks like, what the constitution tells us about how states will be, जो एक फेडरल सिस्टम है इंडिया का, राइट? सो ऑब्वियसली द सेंटर इज लाइक पावरफुल, like it is what is supposed to bind all the states together. But then beyond that, in the federal structure, you have something called states, right? Now, India, or its states for that matter, does not run according to religious perceptions of religious understandings of law, right? There is a certain rule of law that is practiced in India. So Mustafa साहब, मैं थोड़ा, it is an unfortunate point, but थोड़ा सा मतलब इंडिया के फेडरल स्ट्रक्चर को अगर हमारे लिसनर्स को समझाएं कि व्हाई स्टेट बिकम्स important, why the governor to work on the aid and advice of the council of ministers becomes important.
पहली बात तो on the point of that article I also read it. Not only
Hmm.
it is problematic, but at the same time it is, I think, defaming the all the Muslims of Ladakh, क्योंकि
Hmm.
it said very इसको कहते हैं ना, काफी चीजें थी which cast aspersions on इस तरह से, and it was very problematic. I read it and it did not make sense. Why? Because going by very simply, if you break it down very simply, if
Hmm.
you go by that logic, then except for Hindus, every other religion in India, they are slaves. Because if you keep going by his logic, so Hindus, India is a Hindu majority state, where 80% of the population is Hindu. For
Hmm.
by his logic, then all of us are slaves. तो ऐसा है
Yeah.
नहीं है, तो that problematic इसी से ही हो जाता है. I do not want to deal with that article
Hmm.
because I believe it is way too silly to give that space to that
No.
article. तो बस
Hmm.
इतनी सी बात है कि बट कमिंग टू द पॉइंट, दिस इज समथिंग व्हिच आई हैव अ फीलिंग कि लोगों में भी ऐसे खदशात है कि भाई ऐसा तो नहीं होगा कि मुस्लिम मेजोरिटी जो लद्दाख है
Hmm.
मुस्लिम मेजोरिटी हो जाएगा, मुसलमान सब ऐसे आएगा, तो वो एक दिल दिल में जो है वो ऐसा नहीं होता है। जो हमारी इंडिया का जो पॉलिटिक्स है, इट इज़ पार्टी बेस्ड पॉलिटिक्स, इट इज़ नॉट रिलीजन बेस्ड पॉलिटिक्स, नॉर इट इज़ नंबर बेस्ड की, वरना तो फिर अगर आज तक जितना इलेक्शंस हुए हैं, तो ऐसा तो कोई स्कोप ही होना चाहिए था बाकी रीजनल पार्टीज को। जो हमारे
Hmm.
बहुजन की पार्टीज हैं, जो हमारे दलितों की जो पार्टीज है, बाकी जो लेफ्ट की जो पार्टीज है, वो सब तो चले जाना चाहिए था। एक हिंदू मेजोरिटी एक पार्टी होता तो ऐसा तो है नहीं इंडिया में। ऐसा है कि जो पार्टी बेस्ड पॉलिटिक्स है। बट इफ यू लुक एट द हिस्ट्री ऑफ पर्टिकुलरली हिस्ट्री हमारे अगर उठा के देखेंगे लद्दाख की, तो हमारे यहाँ पे अभी तक 11 एमपीज आए हैं, जिसमें से आप गेस कीजिए कितने एमपीज हमारे बुद्धिस्ट रहे होंगे। 7 एमपीज हमारे बुद्धिस्ट रहे हैं और 4 जो एमपीज है वो मुस्लिम्स रहे हैं। और इस तरह
mm,
से देखें तो हमारी जो हिस्ट्री भी देखेंगे तो बहुत सारे राजा हैं ऐसे, जनरल ये हमारे सिंह नमग्याल जो हमारे राजा हैं, वन ऑफ द मोस्ट सेलिब्रेटेड राजा, ही इज ए हिंदू, ही इज ए बुद्धिस्ट रूलर इन दैट एरिया वेयर इवन लद्दाख वाज ए पार्ट ऑफ गिलगित बल्तिस्तान, मोर ऑफ ए मेजोरिटी मुस्लिम एरिया, जो 10 लाख की वहाँ पॉपुलेशन की भी अगर आप गिनेंगे, तो ऐसे में
mm,
ऐसा नहीं होता है। लद्दाखी बुद्धिस्ट हैव ऑलवेज फ्लरिश्ड और दे आर नॉट इनसिक्योर पीपल, जिससे इस तरह की कोई इनसिक्योरिटी होगी। एंड फर्स्ट एंड फॉरमोस्ट ऑल ऑफ अस आर, जैसे हमारी जबान ngati skat जरना ngati स्वेरा जरना ngati आइडेंटिटी शक्ल सूरत जरना ngati जबान जरना कल्चर जरना सक ngata लद्दाखी। और पहले हम ट्राइब्स हमारी आइडेंटिफाई पहले होते हैं, देन आई थिंक रिलीजियस आइडेंटिटी से किसी को आइडेंटिफाई करते हैं हम। जैसे इफ आई गो समवेयर आई डू नॉट इंट्रोड्यूस माई सेल्फ एज कि मैं मुस्लिम हूँ अलग से हूँ, आई इंट्रोड्यूस माई सेल्फ एज ए लद्दाखी।
see, मैं जब हिस्ट्री पढ़ता हूँ तो when the Dogras were invading, I've seen how people from Leh and Kargil collaborated to fight against the Dogras, right? So there has always been this sense of being together, but unfortunately there have been, aspersions, or you can say intrusion of communal politics from mainland towards Ladakh, even in the modern part of Ladakhi history. Chalo. Going on from that, uh, the failure, or you can say largely what I want to locate is that the tribals across the Himalayan regions have still not been able to come up with a leadership which would help, all of these tribes to come together and build up a narrative, at least help build a definition, right? Because आप constitutionally देखोगे तो we have still not been able to define what tribes or tribals are, right? In the UN as well. In America, I think now there is this acceptance of tribes being indigenous communities, right? But when it comes to India, when you read articles of people like Virginius Khaka or Romila Thapar for that matter, you understand that there is a certain reluctance to accept the tribes or tribals as indigenous communities, right? And जैसे अभी वनवासी is, the forest dwellers is the dominant term that is used, right? So in all of these debates, I mean, it is actually the tribals from the Himalayan belts that have ended up being the biggest losers, because when we see, look at the number of tribal, students from these regions getting scholarships or getting selected in the central services, etc., right? We end up being the biggest losers. And I simply do not understand the reason or the lack of, leadership that has failed to emerge in all of these regions where a leader could unite all of these regions, because it is simply the necessity of time, right? Because a state like UP has 80 MPs, right? And I mean, we'll never make up that number if Ladakh, Himachal, Sikkim, and all of these seven, eight northeastern states also come together to protect the interests of, you know, the tribes in the Himalayan regions. We're still not going to make a significant impact, but I think we need to have a say, in policy making, and that is only possible when all of these leaders come together on a common platform, right? The scheduled 5 areas, the leaders somewhere seems to have come together and developed a particular idea of what they want, right? Of course, they've not been able to achieve much, but I think the tribes across the Himalayan regions also need to come together and develop a strategy, because I feel like this entire Schedule 6 or reservations is not just, an economic upliftment program or policy, A. Second, it is not just for reservations and protections, B, but it is also, so that we get a share in the policy making, For example, I often end up giving this example because in a group, in a room maybe full of 10 people, where you can say that 5 or 6 of them are, very well built and they're strong. And then there are 4 or 5 people who are not that well built, or they're not sorry, 3 or 2 of them are not that well built, or they're not physically strong, or they're not aware of the culture that is existing in that room. When a particular cake or anything comes in that room, and when it comes to division of that, until and unless you have some legal protection, or legal aid which guarantees that of that cake, these 3 people will also get a share, right? It is, our rights are not assured in that sense, right? So I see reservations working in that order as well, wherein when the tribes do not get a share of, their policy making or their rights in the Indian state, these reservations assure us, or it gives us a legal right, a protection that ensures or guarantees that we get a share of our cake in that particular room. right? So it is uh, basically a little sad that the people from our regions or from the tribal regions do not really understand what reservations are, and often end up supporting say the creamy layer policy that came for the OBCs, right? And today we have the EWS, and no, a majority of our people also believe that once a particular family is upgraded into a particular class, then they should let go of their reservation, right? But what they do not understand is the ultimate impact that it is going to have on the assurance that the Indian Constitution gives us through these reservations, right? So, uh, Mustafa Saab, I just maybe, I mean, can you like talk a little bit about like protection and reservations and why that becomes necessary legally, right? And how it does not come at a cost of the general category people or the unreserved in that sense, right? It is just our fair share, right? For example, the general category, say, I mean, the upper caste within the Indian society, it is said that they do not even constitute 10% of the society, but they it is a fact that they constitute more than 60 or 70% of whatever jobs and resources that are there. They are owning it, or they get a share of it, right? So in that context, how protections or reservations kind of function in that sense?
Coming to the previous point of people, there being a misconception among people that if we become a state, then
Hmm.
it would be a Muslim majority. That is truly false. It's
Hmm.
absolutely misinformation, because Ladakh is although we are a homogeneous society, but at
Hmm.
the same time there are discords and fissures within our society also. Yes, if you look at Leh, some other day someone was saying that हम modern tribes हैं लद्दाख ले को देख के हमें लगता ही नहीं कि ट्राइबल कितना बड़ा है. But that is also a mirage. That is also not true, because Leh is not just Leh city. Leh is very huge. Leh is
Hmm.
Changthang also, Leh is Nubra also, Leh is other places also which are very, very backward. And similarly, Kargil is not just Kargil main market. It is Dras, it is Zanskar, which is one of the remotest areas in the whole country. तो इस तरह
Hmm.
से there are discords within us, within our society. तो ऐसे में to say that all the Muslims will unite and they'll form a party and they'll become majority in the assembly, that is very stupid idea. I don't buy that, and it is very irrational, illogical at all together, because जो भी हमारी जब पॉलिटी डिसाइड होता है वो पार्टी बेस पे डिसाइड होता है. तो एज आई वाज सेइंग कि ले में लद्दाख में मुस्लिम मेजोरिटी तब से है, बट फिर भी हमारे जो ले की जो बुद्धिस्ट लीडर्स हैं वो बहुत अच्छा कर रहे हैं, नॉट जस्ट इन पॉलिटिक्स, अदरवाइज ऑल्सो इन बिजनेसेस. सॉरी, एक सेकंड के लिए कुछ आवाज आ रही है, वो बेचने वाले नहीं आते ट्रक्स वो हैं.
Hmm. Hmm. Ah, okay, it's okay. It's not that loud. I think you can
अच्छा,
continue.
हाँ, तो
Hmm.
ले में it that argument, that idea comes from a sense of insecurity, which I
Hmm.
believe majority of the Buddhists are not insecure about their identity. They are more confident than they are insecure. तो ऐसे में ये बहुत बुरा आइडिया मुझे लगता है, क्योंकि ये एक ऐसा एक उसको करने की कोशिश करते हैं लोग ये आर्गुमेंट देकर. तो जो आम लोग होते हैं जो मतलब समझता नहीं इन चीज़ों पे या गौर नहीं करते हैं, उनको लगता है कि भाई ऐसा सही में सच हो सकता है. जैसे इन
Hmm.
इंडिया देश से दैट हिंदू खतरे में है, 2050 में मुसलमान ओवरटेक करेंगे, तो ऐसा नहीं होता है. पॉलिटिक्स में डजंट वर्क दैट वे, राइट? नाउ कमिंग टू द
Hmm.
क्वेश्चन ऑफ हाउ देयर इज नीड for a consolidation of the tribal people across Himalayan region, I see a big, for the lack of a better word, and with
Hmm.
apologies, ki there's a handicap in that, because India is such a diverse area. It is so
Hmm.
difficult to consolidate and make solidarities within a state. तो बाकी states की तो बात ही नहीं होती है. In Ladakh also it becomes so difficult. हमने
Hmm.
कभी भी लद्दाख में ही अगर आप देखेंगे तो हमारे ट्राइबल आइडेंटिटी को लेके कभी कोई प्रोग्राम नहीं हुआ कि हम ट्राइब सभा की करेंगे. जैसे
Hmm.
हमारा बुद्धिस्ट कल्चर के बारे में हुआ है, बल्टी कल्चर में होता है, या द्रास वाले शीना कल्चर में करते हैं, आर्यन वाली आयरन में करता है, लेकिन ट्राइब्स को लेके कभी हमारा इस तरह से वो नहीं हुआ है. तो यही
Hmm.
मुझे लगता है वो मौका है. दिस इज द टाइम वेयर इन वी आर एक्चुअली फाइटिंग फॉर द आइडेंटिटी ऑफ दिस ट्राइब्स, and that is why it does not, it becomes immaterial which political or sorry, religious background you come from, because we are trying to protect the tribe, and the protection is with respect to the tribes. सिक्स शेड्यूल की जो बात कर रहा है, वी आर ऑन दैट. although there are
Hmm.
protection for the minorities also in the constitution, जैसे 25 हो गया, article 26 हो गया, but we are not on that. It's a separate
Hmm.
debate altogether. at this point we are at the political representation and on the question of whether how to protect the interest of these tribes. Had we not been tribes, then the argument would have been different altogether. But because we are tribes and because there are provisions for the tribes within the constitution, we are fighting for that. So it the religion anyway becomes immaterial. जैसे हमारे आर्यन
mm,
वैली में लोग बॉनिज्म का भी प्रैक्टिस करते हैं, दे आइडेंटिफाई देम एज सेल्स एज डिफरेंट। जैसे मुस्लिम में शिया सुन्नी बहुत सारे है, जैसे हमारे
mm,
बुद्धिज्म में है, हिनायाना महायाना बुद्धिज्म है। तो इस तरह से बहुत ज़्यादा डिस्कोर्स अपनी जगह है, बट वी आर फाइटिंग राइट नाउ एज अ ट्राइब। एंड दैट इज व्हाट द पीपल ऑफ लद्दाख नीड टू रियलाइज, स्पेशली जो हमारे यूथ है, कि इट इज अ ट्राइबल फाइट फॉर इट्स ओन आइडेंटिटी विच इज ऑलरेडी देयर। ना हुआ क्या है कि लद्दाख के केस में व्हाई इज इट दैट लद्दाख डिड नॉट गेट द सेम प्रोटेक्शन एज fifth schedule or sixth schedule till now? It is because we are a part of Jammu and Kashmir, and those rights were secured under Article 35 and 370
mm,
because it was a special power. But in that also, when we were a part of Jammu and Kashmir, there were certain tribal interests of Ladakh which are altogether separate from that of the rest of Jammu and Kashmir, which we never asserted because there was no need. But now the you remove minus 370 minus 35A, जब हम अकेले रास्ते पे कश्मीर जम्मू कश्मीर और हम अलग चलते हैं तो हमारी जो जर्नी ऑल टुगेदर डिफरेंट हो जाती है। So whatever
mm,
we have dealt with in the past becomes irrelevant now because it is a we are become square zero पर जब हम आ गए तो हमें ये लगता है कि भाई अब तो हम नॉर्थ ईस्ट की तरफ ज्यादा इंक्लाइन करते हैं, जम्मू कश्मीर
mm,
को हम नहीं देखते हैं। ठीक है,
mm,
तो
mm,
जम्मू कश्मीर को आप नहीं देख रहे हैं, हम क्यों देख रहे हैं नॉर्थ ईस्ट को? बिकॉज हमारे प्रोटेक्शन वहां सर्व हो रहे हैं, अभी तक हमारे प्रोटेक्शन यहाँ सर्व हो रहे थे। इट इज लाइक दैट। जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल कमिंग अनदर आर्ग्यूमेंट दैट आई वांट टू गिव इज दैट व्हेन वी आर अ पार्ट ऑफ जम्मू एंड कश्मीर स्टेट, वी आर अ मेजर मुस्लिम मेजॉरिटी। But if you
mm,
look at Kargil and Leh, so Leh is far more better developed than Kargil is. So that is another argument why it is not a Muslim thing. It is that it is very diverse, very nuanced होता है बहुत ज़्यादा। Now coming back
mm,
to this part कि हमारा जब ट्राइबल रिलीजन हो गया तो इसलिए मुझे लगता है मुतासिर, आई एग्री विद दैट। मतलब इमेजिनली एकेडमिक लेवल पे मैं चाहता हूँ कि बहुत ज़्यादा कंसोलिडेशन हो, जैसे ट्राइबल ग्रुप्स की होता है या दलित की होते हैं या बहुजन समाज पार्टी या जनजाति की होती है, तो ऐसे में होना चाहिए। बट वो पॉसिबल नहीं हो पाता है बिकॉज
mm,
different different levels पे somebody is called the mini constitutions there are in India. The
mm,
schedule is also a mini constitution because it is so
mm,
wide. So there are different different battles happening at different levels,
mm,
different level पे different fights चले, तो वो बड़ा मुश्किल होता है उसको कंसोलिडेट इंडिया में कर पाना। वो नहीं
mm,
होना एक अच्छा है मेरे हिसाब से, क्योंकि इंडिया
yeah,
इज द ब्यूटी ऑफ इंडिया इज दैट इट इज डाइवर्स। आप और मैं चाह के दोनों मिल के ना एक टीम बना के किसी को हराना चाहते हैं, वो नहीं हो पाता बिकॉज यू एंड आई आर डिफरेंट ऑन सो मेनी लेवल्स। तो मेरे
mm,
किसी को इतना कीप मैचिंग यहाँ यहाँ सिग्नल पकड़ता रहता है ना, दैट इज ब्यूटी, दैट इज द ब्यूटी ऑफ इंडिया कि हर किसी का किसी के साथ सिग्नल पकड़ रहा है। हमारा कश्मीरियों के
mm,
साथ बहुत ज्यादा सिग्नल पकड़ता था, अब यहाँ हमारा नॉर्थ ईस्ट में सिग्नल पकड़ रहा है। तो कभी कभी हमारे जो सिक्स शेड्यूल्ड ट्राइब एरियाज है, तो इट इज ऑल
mm,
अबाउट नेगोशिएशन, नॉट बार्गेनिंग, इट्स ऑल अबाउट दैट। इंडिया इज बिकॉज कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन वेरी वाइड, देयर इज जैसे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनलिज्म का जो कॉन्सेप्ट, इट इज दैट ओनली दैट हाउ कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन जो टेक्स्ट है हमारा उसके हिसाब से क्या चल पाते हैं पूरा। जैसे
mm,
हमारे गाड़ी का जो हमारा ट्रैफिक रूल्स है, देयर आर
mm,
ट्रैफिक रूल्स, देयर आर सर्टेन सिविक सेंस आल्सो व्हिच यू डू नॉट हैव टू बी टॉट, आप खुद ही करते हैं। तो इस तरह से कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनलिज्म का आइडिया ये है कि देयर आर मल्टीपल लेवल्स पे जैसे चीजें होती रहती है। तो कंसोलिडेशन में मुश्किल समझता हूँ, बट इफ यू कैन कंसोलिडेट आवरसेल्व्स एट द लेवल ऑफ लद्दाख, दैट आई वुड बिलीव इज अ बिग डील बिकॉज विच होपफुली मतलब टच वुड अभी बहुत अच्छा है कि हमारे लीडर्स
mm,
एक ही प्लेटफॉर्म पे आके लड़ रहे हैं। कुछ चीजें जो हैं जो उसमें कोशिश कर रहे हैं दरार डालने की, वो सक्सेसफुल नहीं हुए, वो अच्छी
mm,
बात है, बट वो चाहता हूँ यही रहे। एंड वंस आर मेजर इनसिक्योरिटीज जो हमारे इश्यूज है सॉल्व हो जाए, जैसे लेजिस्लेचर के हवाले से या सिक्स शेड्यूल के हवाले से, देन स्मॉल डिफरेंसेस हमारे से हमेशा रहेंगी। वो तो घर में भी रहती है, हमारे
mm.
पार्टनर्स के बीच में रहता है, हमारे घर के फैमिली मेंबर्स के बीच में रहता है। इट्स नॉट अ बिग डील आई बिलीव, बट कॉन्सिलिडेशन होना मुझे थोड़ा मुश्किल लगता है।
No, you bring across a very important point, Mustafa Saab. Uh, the basic movement that we are seeing right now, it's all tribal based, right? हमारा जो
एग्जैक्टली
tribal culture है, tribal identity है, and I
एग्जैक्टली
think through this video, through this discussion, मैं youth को भी यही बोलूंगा कि I mean, Mustafa Saab has brought across a very important point to us, and how yes, our religious identity may be important or is important rather, but apart from that, we also need to stick to our tribal identity as well. You know, we have to develop that as well because वो ट्राइबल बेसिस पे ही है जो हमें एक प्रोटेक्शन इंश्योर करता है इंडियन कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के थ्रू।
बिल्कुल
अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट जो एक अभी एक जो यूनिटी एक यूनानिमिटी जो दिखाई दे रही है लद्दाख में, राइट, that also needs to be kept and people need to see and understand, right, like what is happening to the other states, the tribal regions across India, and how creating a divide within ourselves or fighting within ourselves is not going to bear much fruit today in existing political circumstances. Just Manipur, देख लीजिए, right? They have been killing each other. They have been fighting. I mean, whoever is right or wrong is a different matter altogether. But I mean, look who is the biggest loser. It is the people of Manipur. They have lost their loved ones, right? Center तो जब सब कुछ normalize हो जाएगा, they can go and negotiate and things like that. But it is Manipur that has ended up losing. I mean, we look at post-independence Indian history. I mean, because of violence, because of fighting. I mean, it is the tribes who have suffered. Look at Mizoram, look at Nagaland, look at Arunachal. I mean, Bodoland, all of these people. It is the actual people who have, been involved in this fighting that has suffered, right? And I think there is a lesson in all of this, right, where we need to come together as different tribes in Ladakh, and we need to ensure that we get our rights in that sense, right? And also, I think it is not something that is impossible, right? Because we are not demanding something out of the blue or out of the box. It is already there in the constitution, right? And you can throw more light on this, but as far as I've read again, जो बरदौली कमेटी जो बिठाई गई थी शेड्यूल 6 के लिए, तो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूंट असेंबली में जो डिबेट्स हुए, they have already stopped all of those, so many clauses of those recommendations wherein the central government felt that it is not going to be, it is not in favor of the nation state, right? And what exists is what was admissible in the Indian Constitution and what the constitution makers thought that it is permissible. ये at least इतना इनको autonomy मिलना चाहिए, right? And we are just demanding that. It is not something we are demanding like that is going to cause huge havoc in the rest of the country in that sense, right? Baki again, I mean, for somebody who's not really that well versed with laws, when you look at 371 and all, of course there is northeastern states, but then there are also states like Gujarat, Maharashtra, etc. Right now, I mean, one really fails to see how Article 370, 371 would, really give us that much protection when under the same article you have states like Maharashtra and Gujarat also getting their share of protections or reservations in that sense, right? So I mean, Schedule 6 of course the Constitution defines it as a protection for tribals in that sense, and that is why Schedule 6 becomes important, right? But apart from that, another narrative that I find missing in Leh particularly is the rallying behind or the call for statehood in that sense, right? Of course, the educated people or the educated portion of Ladakh does understand and they have accepted this cry for statehood, but there is still a certain sense of, again, um, uh, you can say skepticism when it comes to statehood, right? The lay people, majority of them, or almost 90-80% of them, are still okay with sixth schedule. But when it comes to state, they're still skeptical. Like we've already discussed the religious aspects of it. But then, I mean, we also need to understand how the Indian federal structure works, right? You have the center, then you have states. And it is only in a state wherein the governor works on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, right? Now, you've already, through your interventions, you've already explained how it is never going to work on religious basis in that sense. All of us have our own distinctive dissimilarities as well as similarities. Uh, but how crucial is it for Ladakh to become a state, right? And the only structure under which the governor will be working under the Council of Ministers in that sense, or on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. Yes, sir.
Yeah, coming to your previous point of जैसे on the question of you were asking, sorry I did not answer that, on the question of how reservations came to be
Hmm.
came into place in the first place. So it is because हमारी जो तारीख रही है country की, India की, there have
Hmm.
been an inequality in terms of caste, in terms of otherwise geographical area, in terms of color creed. तो इसमें जो रहा है, तो when we decided to form a constitution, जब partition हुआ which was very brutal, जिससे भी हमारी psyche पे बहुत बड़ा impact हुआ, तो उसकी जब हमने रियलाइज किया नॉट जस्ट इन इंडिया अक्रॉस द वर्ल्ड, इफ यू लुक एट पोस्ट वर्ल्ड वॉर 2, देन पीपल रियलाइज दिस कि ये इस मतलब जो जितनी खून खराबा हुआ उससे पीपल रियलाइज कि भाई हमें एक डेमोक्रेसी और ये लाने की जरूरत है। तो उसमें फिर देन वी डिसाइडेड व्हेन वी सैट टुगेदर ऑल ऑफ अस, कि अनइक्वल पीपल, इनइक्वल पीपल, वेदर इट इज अपर कास्ट और बाकी जो लोग जैसे बी आर अम्बेडकर सब बैठे, तो देन दे डिसाइड कि इट हैज टू बी एन इगालिटेरियन सोसाइटी वेयर इन एवरीबडी शुड बी गिवन देयर राइट्स। नाउ टू डू दैट यू नीड टू हैव अफर्मेटिव एक्शन। तो जो कमजोर है उनको कैसे उसमें रेस में लाया जाए, तो उनको कुछ रिलैक्सेशन दे दो। तो द आइडिया ऑफ सिक्स शेड्यूल केम फ्रॉम दैट, बिकॉज आइडिया सिक्स शेड्यूल सिर्फ 1947 से नहीं, उससे पहले 1882 से, ब्रिटिश के टाइम से इन पे दे रियलाइज दैट इट वाज इंडिजिनस पीपल जो है उनको जरूरत है, क्योंकि बहुत ज्यादा मेन लैंड से बहुत ज्यादा दूर है। तो वो इन 1800s में ब्रिटिश के टाइम पे दे रियलाइज कि ये मेन लैंड से बहुत दूर है, मतलब मेन लैंड से बहुत कमजोर है। तो उस तरह से सिक्स शेड्यूल की बात होती थी नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न जो प्रोटेक्टेड एरियाज थे। तो सिमिलरली जब कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन बना तो जाहिर सी बात है इन अनइक्वल्स को इक्वल करने के लिए हमारे बहुत सारे आर्टिकल्स, राइट टू इक्वालिटी फॉर एग्जांपल आर्टिकल 14 हो गया, आर्टिकल 16 हो गया, एम्प्लॉयमेंट में इनको सबको ये इक्वल होना चाहिए, जो अनइक्वल है उनको अलग से ट्रीट किया जाए, जैसे एसटीज एससीज हो गए, ओबीसीज हो गए। तो एंड देन नाउ कमिंग टू द क्वेश्चन कि आपने कहा क्रीमी लेयर का, तो क्रीमी लेयर में ऑलरेडी सुप्रीम कोर्ट का जजमेंट है, वेरी पॉपुलर, wherein they were adjudicating on the question of whether there can be creamy layer can be applied to the scheduled tribes. So it has said कि it cannot be applied to the scheduled tribe because जैसे मीना राजस्थान का कोई केस था जिसमें सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने कहा कि ये नहीं लगा सकते, because at the end of the day, from what I understand, जितना मुझे याद है उस जजमेंट का, the logic being that कि आप हर किसी को उस पैरामीटर्स में जज नहीं कर सकते जस्ट बिकॉज ऑफ सर्टेन पीपल। जैसे द क्वेश्चन हो ना कि भाई एक दलित आदमी मर्सिडीज लेके आया था, ये कौन सी दलित का ये हो गया, हम तो साइकिल पे चल रहे हैं जो अपर कास्ट है। तो क्वेश्चन इज नॉट दैट, नो क्वेश्चन इज अबाउट द जो परपेचुअल जो परसिक्यूशन रहा है दलित का 14 हजारों सालों तक, उसमें अब एक दलित एक बंदा अगर मर्सिडीज लेकर आ गया तो उससे उसको वो करना, बिकॉज इट्स नॉट इकोनॉमिक टू बिगिन विद, एंड सेकेंडली कि उसको इतना ज्यादा उससे थोड़ी अपलिफ्ट सारे हो गए हैं। ऐसा है ना कि मेजोरिटी ऑफ द पीपल डू नॉट इवन गेट द राइट टू एजुकेशन, नहीं है बहुत सारे लोगों के पास, तो वो रिजर्वेशन का फायदा लेंगे तो सेकेंडरी क्वेश्चन है ना। तो इस तरह से वो क्रीमी लेयर वाला इसमें शेड्यूल टाइप में नहीं लगता है। बट नाउ कमिंग टू द क्वेश्चन जो मुझे लगता है मेन ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है, इज द क्वेश्चन ऑफ वेदर हाउ स्टेटहुड इज इंपॉर्टेंट फॉर लद्दाख, बिकॉज माई अंडरस्टैंडिंग इज दैट इन इंडिया नॉट देयर इज ए फेडरेशन ऑफ स्टेट्स करके ग्रुप ऑफ पीपल है which are basically fighting for state status to other states also in the country, बिकॉज ये लगता है कि इंडिया में बहुत सारे स्टेट, जैसे इनफैक्ट यूपी का भी और विदर्भा का भी, अवध मगध का भी कुछ चल रहा है कि स्टेट्स को कम करके बड़ा स्टेट बनाने की जरूरत है, स्टेट्स को अलग करने की जरूरत है, और जैसे छत्तीसगढ़ और झारखंड बन गए। तो ऐसे में स्टेट इसलिए इंपॉर्टेंट क्योंकि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का जो हमारा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन उसमें डिफाइंड है सारा कि सेंटर के क्या पावर्स रहेंगे, स्टेट्स के क्या पावर्स रहेंगे। जैसे आर्टिकल 246 टॉक्स अबाउट इट, सेवन शेड्यूल, seventh schedule talks about the powers that are between, that are allocated to the center and the powers that are allocated to the states, and there's the concurrent list जिसमें दोनों कर सकते हैं। तो जब आप स्टेट को दे चुके हैं आप वो पावर्स जिसमें सेंटर का भी कोई इख्तियार नहीं होता है, तो that you have to see, because that is the journey of the country, because India is a union of states, it's not the other way around, it's not a top bottom approach, it's a bottom top approach, whereas the states unite and they become a they make into a union। तो ऐसे में स्टेट्स आल्सो हैव देयर ओन राइट्स कि आप किस किस पे लॉ बना सकते हो। जैसे लैंड जिसके हम बारे में बात करते हैं वो स्टेट का प्रेरोगेटिव होता है लैंड, जैसे पुलिस होता है, बहुत सारे सब्जेक्ट्स है, मेडिकल हेल्थ हो गया, एजुकेशन हो गया, सब पे स्टेट का खुद को लॉ बनाने का अख्तियार है और उनको खुद पावर्स है उस पर लॉ बनाने का। इसलिए स्टेट इंपॉर्टेंट है क्योंकि कंट्री में जो सेंटर के बाद जो मोस्ट पावरफुल जो एंटिटी है वो स्टेट है, फिर उसके बाद यूटी लेजिस्लेचर है। तो इसलिए स्टेट का ऑलरेडी डिजिग्नेटेड है कंट्री में, क्योंकि इस तरह से स्टेट्स बनते आ रहे हैं, इसलिए क्योंकि उसके पावर्स ऑलरेडी डिफाइंड है कि किस किस पे वो पावर कर सकता है। इवन सेंटर भी उस पर नहीं कर सकता। ऑल दो 254 रिपग्नेंसी की ये बहुत सारे डॉक्ट्रिन्स है जो बहुत टेक्निकल है, आई डू नॉट वांट टू गो इनटू दैट, बट द पॉइंट बीइंग दैट the subjects on which the states have the prerogative, states have the powers to make laws, in that the center can also not interfere, they also cannot interfere into that, because it has their exclusive domain, there are exclusive domains of the states, उसमें द सेंटर कैन आल्सो नॉट इंटरफेयर। तो उसमें जब ऐसा है तो जरूरी नहीं कि इस तरह से बने, क्योंकि जब आप एक सेंट्रल लेवल पे लॉ बनाते हैं तो स्टेट लेवल पे लॉ बनता है, तभी तो हमारा इंडियन फेडरलिज्म काम करता है इस तरह से। तो हम स्टेट इसलिए जरूरी है क्योंकि हम स्टेट पे वो चीजें लॉज बना सकें, और स्टेट का बजट जो यूटी का बजट होता है ऑलरेडी डिफाइंड होता है स्टेट का बजट। तो कंसोलिडेटेड फंड जो इंडिया में होता है उसमें ऑलरेडी बजट डिफाइंड होता है स्टेट का, तो स्टेट का बजट भी यूटी से ज्यादा होता है तो और भी ज्यादा अच्छा है। तो ऐसे में स्टेट के लिए क्यों लड़ रहे हैं लोग? तो आई फाइंड इट वेरी फनी व्हेन पीपल से कि स्टेट नहीं जरूरत है, हमें यूटी विद लेजिस्लेचर में 6 शेड्यूल दे दो। नाउ द प्रॉब्लम इज दैट, जैसे मैं इस पे एक बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट आपको पॉइंट ये बताना चाहता हूँ कि द प्रॉब्लम इज दैट कि अगर आपने 6 शेड्यूल दे दिया, विच बेसिकली मीन्स दैट यू आर एम्पावरिंग द एडीसीज, बट एट द सेम टाइम इफ यू डू नॉट हैव द लेजिस्लेचर, then the governor is suppose not going to pass your bills जो आप उनके पास देते हैं। बट इफ यू हैव ए स्टेट काउंसिल ऑफ मिनिस्टर्स होंगे तो इसमें इजी होगा, क्योंकि लेजिस्लेचर भी तो लॉ बनाएगी स्टेट के लिए। जैसे अनलाइक द नॉर्थ ईस्ट, फॉर एग्जांपल मिजोरम या मेघालय, और या फॉर दैट एग्जांपल फॉर दैट पर्पस इवन आसाम और या त्रिपुरा हो गया, उनमें स्टेट असेंबली है, फिर उसके बाद ऑटोनोमस डेवलपमेंट काउंसिल है। जैसे मिजोरम में चकमा लाई मारी है, जैसे मेघालय में ये है अपना गारो खासी जयंतिया है, गारो खासी जयंतिया तीनों है, तो उसमें वो गारो खासी जयंतिया वाले ऑटोनोमस अपना लॉ बनाते हैं, फिर उसके ऊपर असेंबली लॉ बनाती है। लेकिन ये जो सोसाइटीज हैं वो थोड़ा होमोजेनस नहीं है, हेट्रोजेनस है। उसमें कुछ कुछ नॉन ट्राइबल भी बहुत ज्यादा है, उसमें कुछ कुछ ट्राइब्स में नहीं आते हैं, तो इसके रिलीजन पे भी बहुत ज्यादा डिफरेंस है। जैसे मेघालय में तो खैर क्रिश्चियन ज्यादा है, बट अदरवाइज रिलीजन की तरह से त्रिपुरा में जैसे हिंदू ज्यादा है, जो मतलब ट्राइबल एरियाज में, ट्राइबल में नहीं आता है। तो इन दैट सेंस इट इज हेट्रोजेनस। Whereas if you apply the same apparatus to Ladakh, then it is more of a homogeneous society, whereas इतने ज्यादा distortions नहीं है, मतलब सिंपल कम्युनिटी है जिसमें इतना ज्यादा। तो ऐसे में अगर आपका 6 शेड्यूल एरिया की वजह से, 6 शेड्यूल मिलने की वजह से अब असेंबली लेवल पे, सॉरी ऑटोनोमस डेवलपमेंट काउंसिल लेवल पे इफ यू मेक लॉज, then at the same time you can make laws at the state level also, legislature level। let's say कि legislature level पे अगर लॉ बनाया तो इट इज डबल प्रोटेक्शन हो गया ना इससे हमें। So that is why it is important. Unlike the northeastern, it is not going to be that complicated, because I believe the Ladakhi society is more of a homogeneous society compared to the rest of the country, or compared to the rest of the northeastern states. So it becomes easier in that case. When you have a 6 schedule, when you become a 6 schedule area, you also have a legislature. It gives you more autonomy and it gives you more powers, and at the same time, the administration also becomes very smooth. तो एक decentralization proper हो जाती है।
So
हाँ,
basically, matlab, it is like a knife. Huh? If you hand it over to a robber, it will become a weapon. If you hand it over to a chef, it will aid you in cooking nicely. Huh?
exactly, हाँ।
So,
And also
so
on
it's
the question
basically
of
up to our
371,
leaders and our
जैसे
people.
जैसे थ्री
Uh-huh.
सेवेंटी वन का अभी बोल रहे हैं, तो आई इट इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट फॉर मी टू प्रैक्टिकली इमेजिन इट, बिकॉज 371 में यूजुअली क्या होता है कि ऑल द नॉर्थ ईस्टर्न स्टेट्स वेयर देयर इज 371, after becoming states they have been given the powers of 371। 371 basically gives you a certain domain over certain things, जो आपकी असेंबली ऑलरेडी करती है। असेंबली में ऑलरेडी लॉ मेकिंग पावर्स होता है, वो कहती है कि सेंट्रल लॉज एप्लीकेबल नहीं होंगे जब तक असेंबली उसको अप्रूव नहीं करेगी। But if you apply that to Ladakh, in the current apparatus that we have right now, which is the hill councils, which do not have the lawmaking powers to begin with, and that what happens is that when you say 371 to Ladakh, then how is that? Jesse, who is going to decide that the central laws are not going to be applicable in Ladakh? For example, if I say the center makes a certain law on land, and if the as per 371, if the council does not want that to be implemented in Ladakh, ideally there should have been a legislature there। legislature तो है नहीं है, तो हमारे काउंसिल्स हैं। तो काउंसिल्स को अगर एम्पावर कर दिया, फॉर एग्जांपल इन्होंने, तो काउंसिल्स को लॉ मेकिंग पावर दे दिया, तो 371 के जो स्टेट को जो पावर्स होती है असेंबली को, वो पावर चली जाएंगी काउंसिल्स को। But I do not see that being practical, because at the end of the day, councils are still going to be at a statutory level and far inferior to that the bureaucrats। तो bureaucrats का जो वो दबदबाव है हमारे लद्दाख में, वो नहीं रहेगा, फिर भी वैसे ही रहेगा, तो उसमें कोई there won't be any difference। So that I find very difficult to imagine in practically। तो ऐसे में मुझे लगता है 371 they say now there are rumors about 371 being implemented in Ladakh, this is going to be implemented in Ladakh, so I find it very difficult to register it, because I believe that if you have to give 371, then it is important that you give us legislature also। But if they are giving us legislature, then they are not saying it, they are saying that we legislature शायद statehood नहीं देंगे। तो ऐसे में इन councils को how they are going to empower is something which I have not been able to
It
digest
does not
till now।
work out.
It
On
doesn't
that
make
point,
sense to me।
I was reading an article by Stanzin Lashkar. He has written that there are plans to build 7 hydroelectricity projects in Ladakh, apart from the two that we already have. 13 gigawatt solar power plant, 100 megawatt geothermal energy, whereas Ladakh only demands around 50 megawatts. So, the problem with not having six schedule is that, projects like these takes place and, the local people have no clue about it. And recently मैं कल पढ़ रहा था कि there are environmentalists who have written to the government that these so-called natural disasters are not natural anymore. These are man-made. We've not made a better policy for these. Like जैसे अभी उत्तराखंड में कौन सा था this place that was shrinking, that was literally collapsing. You remember, right? We are seeing
Mhm.
cloudburst in Ladakh like never before. The look at the change of climate and temperature, etc. Right? So I mean, look at me. It's still minus 11, 12, I think, in Ladakh, and it's already a good part of the year. So all of these changes, like in order to protect our environment, etc. Also, sixth schedule becomes very important.
Exactly. So that's what we are saying. जैसे the states which enjoy sixth schedule right now,
Mm,
it is they. It is true that those areas, you know, in terms of having powers to make laws, they are quite strong than rest of the country because rest of the states in the country because first they have assembly which make
mm,
laws and it is defined ki uske subjects they have been allocated and at the top of that they have six scheduled area so even the assembly laws to be passed in those district autonomous district areas it has to be passed by the hill councils.
mm,
SMA, you see that it is double protection and these are protected. And I believe
mm,
that the government is very reluctant on this is because I think they realize that it is, something which is
mm,
quite strong. To put it in very
mm,
layman language, बहुत ज़्यादा strong है तो इसलिए नहीं दे रही है. That's why 371 for them looks easy because it is not only implemented in the areas which have six schedule areas, but it is implemented in other states also. For example, गुजरात की जो बात करते हैं. तो ऐसे
mm,
में my understanding is that कि सिक्स शेड्यूल ही लद्दाख के लिए जरूरत है. I what I always advocate is that he in a place like Ladakh, which not only determines, I was saying all the time that it is determines the topography, sorry, the and climate of the whole world, the Himalayas. ऐसे
mm,
में अगर हम सोचें तो देर इज नीड फॉर प्रोटेक्शन बिकॉज जो वेटलैंड्स है लद्दाख के जो रामसर कन्वेंशन के अंदर आते हैं क्रिटिकली जो मतलब बहुत ज्यादा फ्रेजाइल है दोज आर
mm,
आल्सो इन लद्दाख क्रिटिकली इंडेंजर्ड एनिमल्स जो आते हैं जो आईयूसीएन के लिस्ट में क्रिटिकली इंडेंजर्ड आते हैं जैसे हमारा हिमालयन ब्राउन बेयर अभी बाहर निकला है क्रिटिकली
mm,
इंडेंजर्ड नहीं है सिमिलरली जो हमारा लेपर्ड है हमारी जो वाइल्ड लाइफ है it is an asset for the country. There is no
mm,
other place in India which is as beautiful and at the same time as fragile ecologically as Ladakh. So you need to protect that on that ground also alone only कि इस ground पे तो हमें protect करना ही करना है. जैसे एल
ये
नीनो हुआ है हमारा जो वेस्टर्न डिस्टर्बेंसेस होती है इट ऑल डिपेंड्स ऑन हिमालयस जिस वक्त एल
right.
नीनो की वजह से जो विंटर पूरा रिसाइकिल चेंज हो गया पूरा साइकिल इट इज बिकॉज द हिमालयस आल्सो प्ले अ रोल इन दैट वेस्टर्न डिस्टर्बेंसेस में हिमालयस प्ले अ रोल तो ऐसे में I think for on that ground alone, on the ground of environment fragility also, you need to protect Ladakh. And secondly, it is a tribal जो हमारी tribal identity है. It is
Mm,
मिनिस्ट्रीज ने ऐसे उड़ के हवा में तो नहीं बोला है मिनिस्ट्रीज ने तो हिमाचल को नहीं बोला कि मेक देम ट्राइबल इंटो एरिया मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ ट्राइबल अफेयर्स ने रेकमेंड किया है व्हिच दे शुड हैव इंप्लीमेंटेड एंड सेड कि इट इज अ ट्राइबल एरिया एंड थर्डली जो स्ट्रेटेजिकली इतना इंपॉर्टेंट है लद्दाख को तो देयर इज नो अदर वे हाउ डू यू कैनॉट कीप इट एज अ स्टेट सिंपलिसिटर यू कैनॉट कीप
mm,
इट एज अ लेजिस्लेटिव सिंपलिसिटर बीजेपी खुद बोलते हैं कि लद्दाख इज वेरी डिफरेंट हमें बहुत ज्यादा इंपॉर्टेंट है हमारे ऑनरेबल पीएम ने भी और होम मिनिस्टर ने बोला है कि इन दैट सेंस यू लेट द लद्दाख इज डिसाइड वी आर टेलिंग हम जो वहाँ के बाशिंदे हैं लोग बोल रहे हैं कि कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनलिज्म इज दैट आल्सो कि यू लिसन टू द ग्रास रूट पे जो
mm,
वॉइसेस हैं हम बोल रहे हैं कि भाई ये हमारे लिए बेटर है
mm.
हमारे कंट्री के लिए बेटर है तो ऐसे में इनको सुनना चाहिए
Yeah. You
एंड
you
वी
make a
शुड
very important point, Mustafa Sir. I mean, this particular Ladakh is not just the crown of India, but there are also
फॉर द
people
होल
living
वर्ल्ड
in it. Right? It is not. I mean, there are people living in it. Apart from people, there are also other living beings, that are occupying these spaces. Right?
ट्रू
Their protection is also very important. Yeah. Now, coming to the
बिकॉज
policy.
एनवायरमेंट जो हमारा
Yeah.
इंडिया इज ए पार्टी टू मेनी रामसर कन्वेंशन का इंडिया इज नॉट ए पार्टी आई थिंक आई एम नॉट श्योर अबाउट इट बट अदर जितने भी कन्वेंशन बट रामसर कन्वेंशन इज आई थिंक एप्लीकेबल टू इंडिया एज वेल बट अदर कन्वेंशन जो हमारे इन्वायरमेंट पे जैसे कन्वेंशन है 2040 में होने वाला विच इंडिया सस्टेनेबल गोल्स में वी हैव गिवन प्रोमिसेस उस पे भी
Mhm.
कार्बन जीरो करने का लद्दाख इज सच ए ब्यूटीफुल प्लेस वेयर यू कैन एक्चुअली यूज फॉर दीज पर्पसेस कि लद्दाख में कार्बन न्यूट्रल का है हमारे सोलर को किस तरह से टैप किया जाए by making sure that ensuring that the locals are also party to that. So all these things Ladakh make a fit. It makes Ladakh into a fit case for protection. I mean, not only for the people of Ladakh but for the whole country and the world.
Coming to that part, yes. Now, I mean, it is strange that on 27th August 2019, the NCST, National Commission for Scheduled Tribes, in a meeting with all of these, I mean, as it claims in the minutes, that they have had many, meetings with the tribal affairs, home affairs, law, justice, etc., and they have recommended that Ladakh be included in the, sixth schedule. So, I mean, and our MP himself has also given a memorandum in August 2019 asking for Ladakh to be included in the Schedule 6. And suddenly there has been a flipping of goals and the recommendations. So that is very difficult to understand. Like what exactly happened after August 2019 that the government has suddenly changed its stance and it is it seems reluctant to give offer Ladakh sixth schedule.
Now,
Now,
my take on, see, one,
uh,
let me address the elephant in the room. The elephant
okay.
in the room address is that
Mm,
that कुछ चीजें होती ना, we do not discuss them, but
mm,
they are true. What I
mm,
think, my understanding is that RSS does not believe in the diverse India. I believe they believe in a unified India, and they do
mm,
not encourage, I think, tribal identities. वो लगता है,
mm,
well, that is their ideology. They think India is one and everybody should be equal. But the truth of India, the reality of India is that it is diverse. It is extremely diverse, and there is no other country in the whole world which is as diverse and as complicated as India is. So it does not believe in that. That's why they are trying to curtail the other areas also, which are demanding for such autonomies within
mm,
autonomy, within the state. One and two. Now, unfortunately, we are in an era where capitalism, chronic capitalism, is at its peak. वो अपने
mm,
उरूज पे है तो industries. There is a very interesting book called Spoiling Tibet by Gabriel
mm,
Lafayette. It talks
mm,
about how development, they want to develop areas, they want to do mining, they want to do other stuff, they want to do solar. So it is not
mm,
just for the communities of Ladakh they were trying to create solar, it is for the industrialists also. तो
mm.
इंडस्ट्रियलाइजेशन करना का है तो ऐसे में तो वो चीजें जब फैक्टर इन हो जाती हैं तो शायद उस पर नहीं मान रहे. Otherwise, I do not see any reason why they shouldn't make Ladakh into a six scheduled area. So these
You,
are the
you
things, these are the issues.
you make an interesting point because of course I mean like I said they're planning to build so many hydroelectric solar energy thermal energy etc and they're producing more than what the people of Ladakh need, right? And I mean of course they're going to go outside and the crony capitalist or capitalism is one point that we can of course discuss, but apart from that recently in the fifth schedule areas there have been movements wherein they are calling for tribals who have converted to other religions to be that their tribal certificates or scheduled tribe status be taken away. So that is one interesting point which concurs to what you're saying, that there is a possibility of some element of truth in it, right? So yeah. Anyways, so I think we've had a fruitful discussion, Mustafa Saab. Thank you so much for your time. And all I can say is, I hope the viewers, not just in Ladakh, but across the tribal regions in Himalayas, have listened to our conversation and maybe they find some concurrence to what we are saying because we know that in places like Nagaland, Manipur, and Arunachal as well, that people are again calling for six schedule status. Right. And I think maybe even if I remember correctly, Sikkim, Darjeeling is also kind of going through a lot of political instability. So there maybe we can find some concurrence in our issues and where we can come together and discuss, because in the context of Indian democracy I feel like we do not really have an option. We have to come together at some point of time and develop a certain idea of who we are, of our identity, because now again so many years post independence we have still failed to define what scheduled tribes are, right? So that should be a major cause, or concern for that matter, right? So
Scheduled tribes, let me tell you, scheduled tribes are defined to the extent that what constitutes a scheduled tribe area and who is falls under the categories of the scheduled tribe. It is already there, and there are multiple laws for the scheduled tribe
mm,
also. But the
mm,
point is not that. Point is that how in a country like India, which is so beautiful,
mm,
the constitution is so beautiful, and it keeps transforming. It's called गौतम भाटिया जिसपे बोलता है ना कि ट्रांसफॉर्मेटिव कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन इट कीप्स
mm,
ट्रांसफॉर्मिंग जैसे एवरी जजमेंट दैट द सुप्रीम कोर्ट अनाउंसेस and every
mm,
law that the parliament makes, we all of us, irrespective
mm,
of which party is in power and otherwise, we keep
mm,
developing. There are pluses minuses here and there, it is different, but apart from that, otherwise from the constitution points, it keeps growing. जैसे इमरजेंसी के
mm,
टाइम पे बहुत सारी चीजें होगी, फिर उसके बाद और चीजें होगी, अब और चीजें हो रही है, तो मतलब दीज आर थिंग्स दैट कीप हैपनिंग, बट एट द सेम टाइम द कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन इट हैज इट्स ओन जर्नी इन दैट, जैसे व्हाट वी आर सेइंग राइट नाउ। तो post 2019 we have a moment of our own wherein we are saying कि give us these issues, give us these 376 schedule दे दो, statehood दे दो, in that if the government ends up giving something else, so that is also a new modification in the constitution, right? तो constitution
Yes.
इस तरह से grow होता रहता है, तो there is no definite definition of the constitution, so it is also growing at the same time. तो ऐसे में मुझे लगता है कि these fights are important. What people can learn from Ladakh is that one is that the unity that the Ladakhi people have shown, the leadership has shown, and secondly मुझे very strongly believe in that the Ladakh is an example for the rest of the country. As I keep saying all the time, is that when you look at the condition of the electoral politics in the rest of the country, right from trade horsing and everything, it is quite corrupted. It is there's huge corruption in that. But if you look
Yes.
at Ladakh, it is a place where corruption is not that rampant, and people are honest, not only to the Ladakhis themselves but to the country also. And that is the reason we, Danki ki chot pe, we say that we are here to protect the country. And with full confidence, we say, every Ladakhi says that, right? And that comes, the confidence comes through these experiences of us being honest and diligent in what we are doing. And that is the reason why the LSGCs of Ladakh are successful comparatively on several parameters compared to the rest of the northeastern states. The northeast, में जैसे I was reading this book on Nagaland, democracy in Nagaland, very interesting book, which talks about how one of the biggest challenges for them after becoming a state was to how to curb corruption in Nagaland, because बन तो गए state, इतना ज्यादा corruption हो गया, उसमें इतनी मारामारी हो रही थी, you do not know what to do. So then when you read literature on northeast, you realize that these are the lessons you can learn from these are the lessons you can learn from these places. So we, in front of us, we have all the prototype of all these northeastern states जिससे हमें सीखने की जरूरत है. And then you had Jammu and Kashmir, then you have our India की खुद की जो मेन लैंड में जो चीजें हो रही थी, उन सब से मिला के हम एक अच्छा एक सिस्टम बना सकते हैं जिससे हमारे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन इसमें ग्रोथ हो जाएगी. जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनलिज्म का जो कॉन्सेप्ट है उसमें कोई ग्रोथ होता, तो आई बिलीव दैट वी दैट इज व्हाई आई एम नॉट पेसिमिस्टिक एट ऑल. आई एम वेरी ऑप्टिमिस्टिक दैट whatever happens, it will happen for the good, and everything will be, मतलब in the end we will have a system which protects the interest of Ladakhis. तो ऐसे हमारे जो स्ट्रगल्स है जो लोगों की अभी हैं, हमारे लीडर्स की खुसूसन, तो वो कभी जाया नहीं होगी, इतना मुझे पता है.
Agreed, agreed. When it comes to things like patriotism, nationalism, I think, I mean, Ladakhis are an example to the rest of the country. And I mean, certainly, like, I mean, there is no question there, right? When it comes to patriotism, like, there is absolutely no question to be raised there, as is, the situation right now. We've seen over the course of so many years, Ladakhis have stood shoulder to shoulder with our army people here in Ladakh, and I mean, it is for the army people to tell, like, what the people of Ladakh are like when it comes to things like patriotism. ठीक है, Mustafa sahab, I think we've had a long discussion, and it has been a very fruitful and productive discussion for me at least, and I hope our viewers also think of it in the same way. And yeah, hopefully we'll catch up again, and according to the suggestions of our viewers, we'll stay in touch, and if we
पक्का
can
जनाब.
make more
आप,
such programs, it will be interesting. ठीक है, thank you for your
मुझे भी
time,
बहुत अच्छा लगा,
Mustafa.
आपका शुक्रिया मुझे बुलाने के लिए, और ऐसे कॉन्वर्सेशन मुझे लगता है कि होती रहनी चाहिए, जिससे हमारी
Right.
चीज़ें और ब्रॉडन हो,
Mhm.
हमारे पर्सपेक्टिव ब्रॉडन हो, और लोगों की जैसे बाकी जो स्कॉलर्स हमारे हैं वो कंट्रीब्यूट कर सके. Because the
Right.
idea is to form a system within the constitution which is democratic, which is egalitarian, and which is equal, and so that not only the people of Ladakh benefit out of it, but the people of country across the country benefits out of it. तो ऐसे
Mhm.
में ये हम सबका ये होना चाहिए. तो इसमें
Right.
everybody who contributes is, it should be quite appreciated, तो मुझे लगता है.
ठीक है, thank you so much.